I'm going to take, so that you all can think about your questions, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and throw a question out there that I've been wanting to ask. So I'm going to quote briefly from page 7 of this excellent book. So you just graduated from college, and you haven't yet made your commitment to saving the family farm. And Forrest writes, the weeks passed, and for any array of reasons, I was turned down as a sports reporter for my local newspaper, as a waiter for 2 different restaurants, as a full-time whitewater raft guide, and finally, as a custodian at an animal shelter, cleaning up dog food. I honestly didn't know whether to be insulted or grateful. So, since we have some undergraduates in the audience, I'm curious if you could reflect a little bit on knowing what you know now that you chose to pursue farming. Would you still go back and major in English at William and Mary? Would you still make that investment of your time, to family resources to do that? How the skills you acquired in college kind of played a role in your work now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any good college education just teaches you how to problem solve. I mean, I double majored in geology, and I wasn't qualified to go blast things, in a quarry, or go solve the problem with the San Andreas fault. Okay, I make no illusion about that. So, like, my college education, in hindsight, is valuable because college, especially at a good college like UVA, just throws you into an academic rigor of term papers and tests and all this stuff, and it makes your brain get calibrated to multi-problem solve. And farming's perfect for that. Farming is just a complete palette of problems every day. And I mean, I guess the best way I can answer that question is to throw it back at you guys. What is it about today outdoors that anybody with any good sense, as soon as you're done here, makes you want to go outside and enjoy the day? What is that about us as humans that is disinclined to sit in here for the rest of the day when we should go be playing frisbee or whatever? And that's what farming has just a very primal connection. I mean, why shouldn't it? It's food, it's nature, it's these tolerances and these extremes that we just have to test ourselves against. It's a beautiful thing. So I wouldn't do anything differently, but I'm kind of almost bizarrely optimistic. So, yes, you had a question first.
I had a question. You kind of spoke about cost of land being the major barrier to entry. If you don't have a family farm,
sure. Yeah, the question is, I spoke as a cost of land as a major barrier to entry, maybe not but certainly a big one. And if you don't have land, what can you do? The opportunities, thank goodness. Like when I was coming up, just put in perspective, and a lot of folks can remember, in 1996, the internet had 3 pages. Okay, it was like ESPN where you check your sports scores, and Washington Post had a page or whatever. The internet, my God, what a tool now as a connection tool. Social media. So I took out a bunch of slides in here that I could have put up about what's next. Facebook and Kickstarter and all these things are great ways for us to connect and capitalize that just didn't exist up to a couple years ago. How does that work? As this movement is gaining cultural penetration, there are many, many older landowners that had children like my age that took a pass on wanting to be family farmers and would love to connect with younger farmers in the form of long-term leases. A prime example of which is Cliff Miller in Sperryville and Waterpenny Farm. They signed a 50-year lease with Cliff Miller to farm, to give them security as farmers, long-term security, for a very reasonable, very cut rate price, because Cliff had a mission in mind that he wanted to see this land in use and produce food. So that's one example, signing long-term lease, renting property. Tons of property around here as I was driving down 29 for rent or lease. So yeah, I think we are definitely a mindset culturally of having to own things, but when things are priced so unaffordably relative to the return that we're going to get out, we have to have the discipline to think different about it.
But I guess, if I can take two, if you make $18 the first year, you're out, right?
Yeah. No, my situation was unique because it was my family farm. So I got like a mulligan on that one, yeah. But I guess in another roundabout way, saying like the internet is so valuable to connect us with people, in 2014, there's more opportunities for successful role models out there after 15, 20 years of this kind of farming that offer apprenticeships, that offer internships, where you can go and get valuable experience, right? It can't be overstated, under controlled conditions through somebody that has a successful track record. You can research these people, you can interview former apprentices, see what they got out of it, and go to a place where you're valued, you're going to gain skills that are immediately translatable and scalable to a population of 400 million people that have to eat every day. So, I mean, these are all kind of general things, but the beauty of the family farm is everything is unique. Okay, we're going to apply those unique things, so we have to think broadly at some point. I think you had a question first.
So what regulations could change tomorrow that would help you as an independent farmer in terms of getting food to market?
I'm kind of like if anybody came to a lecture thinking like they were going to hear like a rant about government or anything like that, I love. I've got some problems with the way the system's set up. For example, raw milk is like kind of like a glaring omission in that. But in the most part, our system is set up, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years. You have to either really be flaunting the law or just doing something really wrong to have any real problems. And that comes from people that are fruit growers, vegetable growers. I'm a meat grower. The system is built up with a lot of cushion in it. So I can't, necessarily think, at some point, so much of our food is subsidized on one end, taken out of our paycheck for corn and soybean and fuel and price support, crop insurance, all these things, that I have a great deal of pride as a producer saying like, look, I'm not passing any of these costs on. I'm not taking anything out of anybody's tax dollar. So I operate a little bit independent, follow the law, but like don't really pay a whole lot of attention as long as I'm following the rules. One thing that is coming down the pike, this seems to be, is this FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, where any farmer who's grossing over $500,000 has to follow a whole bunch of protocols that smaller producers are very concerned that's going to drive a lot of folks out of business. We're able to skirt some of that because we already operate out of a USDA inspected facility. But yeah, that could be hugely problematic. So we need to, as consumers, as people, know thyself. As consumers, know thy farmer, right? So connect with your farmers, and they're going to be your boots on the ground. Did you follow up?
One more. You mentioned how much livestock you
right.
each year. How many people does it take to have that?
Right. I was talking with Kate earlier about this. We have 10 full-time employees, okay? So I'll say that first. And I always love when they talk, the Democrats and the Republicans get together and yell at each other about small businesses. Like, we're one of those small businesses that they yell at. We're like a small farm is like a huge economic engine. Our farm is intended for 2 people, though, okay? Because the nature of farming is so fragile, so vulnerable, so prone to things that it can be run with 2 people. But yeah, sir.
You talked about how big agriculture wants to keep us in this perpetual state of fear of going hungry. So I was wondering, if we were to have all of our food, produced by these alternative or local systems, kind of following your model, what would our national production, food production and distribution system look like? I wonder if you can just talk about that kind of by the numbers, like on a productivity per land basis, on a price point level.
Yeah, no problem. I wouldn't say that big ag wants us to do that. I'd say like really loud voices want us to do that, whether they're media bullhorns or persuasive bloggers or whatever, and some farmers for sure. But I'm not saying there's like a conspiracy out there like holding us back or anything like that. What is holding us back is young people in broad enough numbers intersecting the human amount of management that has to occur. There's just not enough experienced young people to execute this now. So for the people that are like in the loop, it's frustrating. Like, why can't we speed up slow food? ironically, right? Why can't we just speed up the patience process? Well, that's not how patience works. It's like an intersection of vision and sustainability. But to give you some numbers, for example, the amount, so let's take grain, for example. We have over 100 million acres of grain that's grown this year. Corn last year was at $8 a bushel, and it's going to be about $4.50 or so this year. 40% roughly of the grain that's grown goes into ethanol. Okay, so a huge amount of the grain that we grow goes right into our gas tanks. The other another 40%, so we're up to 80%, like that, goes into animal feed. All right, chickens, 100%. It's, if we got into free-range chicken, it's like 0.001% of a piece of chicken for everybody in the country. Okay, so we're way over 99% repeating of confinement chicken, cattle, and pigs is where this corn goes into. All of a sudden, we're right up in the mid-80s, depending on who you ask. Where's the first human food bit of corn go to? It goes into high fructose corn syrup. Okay, soda pops and candy bars and all this stuff. When we start getting, and I was told by smarter people than me, these numbers, when we first start getting into where our corn goes for human food, it's to food relief around the world. It gets shipped out of the country to the tune of about another 5%. So our tortillas and our fritos and all these things, the very small single digit, right in the single digits. Okay, so how does that translate into grass-fed animals, for example? And I'm not saying we need to save the world with grass-fed hamburgers. Okay, it takes a good producer on average land 2 acres to finish a steer. Okay, well a grass-fed steer takes 2 years. Okay, well according to the USDA, and again, you know how those numbers can kind of be a little funny. Beyond what's already in use in the country in actual pasture and rangeland, there's an additional 600 million acres of pasture, rangeland, meadows, all these things that aren't being used. Okay, that's upon the several billion acres that we have in the country. Okay, so take that with, just from a grass-fed cattle standpoint, take some experienced managers and work in some free-range pigs, some free-range chickens, some grass-fed sheep, which translate about 7 lambs to every 1 grass-finished steers, kind of the ratio on that, and collaborate, with some vegetable growers on top of that. Put in some perennial polyculture with nuts and orchards and. I'm not standing up here making this stuff up. This stuff happens. It's happened. It'll continue to happen. It's successful. It requires experienced people that want to do it and customers to value it. That's the only thing holding it back. The opposite end of why is organic food so expensive is the other side of that coin is why is the other stuff so cheap, right? And that's kind of the argument we constantly get thrust at, why we can't do this stuff. But hopefully that's about how far I can answer your question on some of that. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Just a little bit of a follow-up about the price point. For people who really just can't afford or aren't interested in buying food at that price and they want to buy the conventional lower priced food, how do those people come into play?
I don't know. That's not to sound like trite or insensitive. We didn't get to 90. We didn't get to, in 1990 we were at 0.1%, okay, and we've gone to 3%, 500% growth. We didn't get to 99.9% thinking about are we driving farmers out of business, okay? So it became my job to kind of say whoa, time out. I'm going to save my place, okay? And charity begins at home with my place, okay? So we're going to save our place and hopefully be representative. But at the same time, I don't expect to get back to 100%. The other way. I don't expect to go back to 08 or whatever. That's foolish to think that too. All I'm suggesting is balance. So how can we get back to balance? Balance is going to provide choice for people right now. Its choice isn't super available, I'd say. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's really admirable that you are really heavily pursuing direct-to-consumer marketing and trying to reach consumers through farmers markets. But I also I've been researching a few things about food hubs, and I realized that maybe a bigger way to reach markets and businesses and institutions would be through food hubs. So
right.
I had a 2-pronged question. One is have you come in touch with a local food hub in Charlottesville, Virginia? And the second question is like, how useful are food hubs to small farmers
Right.
like you?
Well, strictly by coincidence, my best friend is Steve Vargo and his wife Adri, who pretty much ran Dave Matthews Farm down the way and contributed very heavily to the food hub there. So yeah, I mean, I think that in any good capitalistic model, there's going to be opportunities beyond just producers. Now, when I was starting out in 1996, farmers markets were the sensible way to go. And this is kind of the fun trajectory of the book about how many times I failed trying to get all this stuff done. But that's because like we kind of had a cultural precedent for that stuff. Like farmers markets was kind of like the destination for if people wanted fresh, they needed to go to farmers markets. If I was starting up all over again, like farmers markets is a lot of flipping work. You know, it's like I got helpers and tents that'll blow down the street, and I set up in the rain and the snow all winter long, and blah blah blah. So if I was doing it again, I might reboot it and kind of like maybe do a CSA or have more of an agritourism angle, or maybe collaborate with a food hub. That's a roundabout way of saying, yes, when a system gets up to $30 billion, like we've arrived, that creates opportunities that might not have been there 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot smarter people than me coming up with solutions going forward that I'm going to be like, that's brilliant. I wish I thought of it. Yeah. Sir.
So I know you're out of Clark County. I have a lot of family there, and I know that area is much more conservative and a lot more reticent to accept like the strip malls and the Walmarts
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right.
Has that been really beneficial in terms of managing your farm in an area like that?
Yeah, to put a little bit of perspective on 1990, Clark County was kind of prescient and did like a comprehensive plan where they kind of broke the farm down and made it a really intentional agricultural community. But where my farm physically butts up to is in Jefferson County, West Virginia, which is kind of the pipeline for revenue for the whole rest of the state. We've got racetracks and gambling and all sorts of stuff. So I really get two sides of the picture where we are kind of like this, sort of unofficial manipulation of the capitalism stops here unless it's capitalism like we like it. No Sheetses and we got one McDonald's and one Sheetz in our county or something like that. And right across the road, it's kind of like spotlights and dancing. People dancing professionally, if you take my meaning. So yeah, I get it. I'm very close to home on both ends of that. It can be helpful because we've got things like Tractor Supply Company that likes to set up shop because we've got so many hobby farmers. We have a lot of horse people that tracks to. And I love horse people because they keep open green space. They keep open services that I really value. It's like for a lot of these folks, it's kind of an afterthought to them, but it's critical for me to have these places. So, yeah. Sir.
You said you've been in this for about 20 years. This is just a somewhat interesting question. We were talking about how much money that it takes to purchase organic foods as compared to foods that aren't organic. And I realize that it's very difficult for some families who can't afford to purchase it. But I'm really interested as to why some families who are able to purchase organic foods and who have that capacity don't do it. Do you find that happens often in the 20 years that you've been in this business? Does that happen, and why do you think that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's connected like you are to it and is thoughtful about it, we're in that kind of 3% bracket. And when you're in that, then you tend to talk with people that are also in it. You tend to circle, any kind of peer group does that. So then it becomes like hard, like, well, why wouldn't it, other people value this and whatnot. And I think it's contagious. I mean, the trajectory that we're on, it's unstoppable now. But I mean, to put that in perspective, to go from 0.1% to 3% is 500% growth. But that's still only 3% of the population. To go another 100%, we're talking, to go to 6% is a redoubling of all 100% of those people. And then another redoubling, huge amounts of people. So I expect that trajectory to level off and to slow down. But hopefully that'll give us pace for producers to come up with authentic supply. Because when you get that much demand, people start to cheat. Take shortcuts. You had your hand up way in the back real first. I'll get to you, man.
Could you speak to, on that point, could you speak to some of the challenges that small and medium-sized farms face in getting organic certification?
Sure.
You cost and record keeping aspects of that to be, are we going to have an unhealthy kind of monopoly effect with big organic that's going to essentially
Right.
constrain small people?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, can I speak to some of the regulations and costs associated with going certified organic? I'm not certified organic. I made that choice in the late 90s by being a direct marketer. I answer questions all day long to folks, so they value that. I've never gotten any negative feedback about that. If I was in Nebraska or North Dakota, would I go certified organic if I wanted to save my farm? Probably, because that allows a label to represent my product through a secondary authenticator, right? The only trouble with that is two things you alluded to are costs. For a small-time producer, it's between time and actual paperwork and fees. It can cost anywhere on the very cheap end from $500 to about $5,000, which makes a real difference to people starting out. Two, there's a lot of holes that get shot in the authentication process. There's withdrawal periods for antibiotics. There's, it's not antibiotic free. It's like if 90-day or 120-day withdrawal periods. There's plenty of folks that take advantage of the fact that animals can be raised in a barn as long as they have access to the outdoors. So for some producers, that literally means opening up a door a couple times a day, sometimes when the inspector's there, to animals that are, like you would be if you lived in this room all the time and we threw open all the shades. No, the light, we'd be like vampires, right? Or trolls in The Hobbit, whatever. Bring up to speed. So yeah, there's problems with all that stuff, and the third of which is monoculture organics. What are we really accomplishing? And Kate and I were talking about this a little earlier. We're probably accomplishing, more soil building and less, more healthy soils from a fungus and microbial and bacterial standpoint. But from a nutritional standpoint, getting some organic lettuce here and some conventional. If we did a nutritional breakdown, it wouldn't surprise me if we did a blind test, they'd be practically identical. That wouldn't surprise me. So yeah. Ma'am, you've been very patient.
As to why some people don't choose organic food, even though they could buy it, I think we need to publish a lot more cookbooks because I think it's key that somebody take the time to actually cook at home.
Right.
And the passing up of the organic food, I think, is selecting stuff out of the frozen food that's almost prepared, and
Great.
it's competition.
Great idea, and I'm working on it.
Okay.
So thanks for that subtle endorsement.
Yeah.
Without knowing it. Yes, sorry.
So you're a family farm and you're not certified organic.
Right.
A lot of people assume family farms represented at farmers markets are going to be practicing organic methods.
Right.
And not all farmers at farmers
Sure.
markets are,
Absolutely not.
practicing organic or resilient methods or, non-chemical inputs and so forth. So how do you address the confusion in your farmers markets and the consumer?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, not all farmers that sell at farmers markets are organic or sustainable, and how you address that question. That becomes an onus on the customer. I think it's, it's really easy for me especially to get sloppy and feel like farmers market equals organic equals sustainable, equals local, and that's not the case at all. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's not the impression that I wanted to leave with you guys at all. It gets back to that picture of the smiling folks and connections to our food. If somebody's going to show up at farmers market, then that's a tacit endorsement of saying, ask me questions. Ask them production methods. Ask to see their farm. If they can't reasonably give you time to come visit their farm within a couple months, I'd say red flag.
You don't think those farmers who are not practicing those methods by being, aren't they not truth in advertising either? Kind of riding on your tailcoat, your coattails, saying, well,
Yeah,
I might look organic to everybody, but I'm not going to.
That's a murky thing. Organic farmers didn't invent farmers markets. They're older than that movement. Yeah, I mean, farmers market, the market concept itself is ancient, you know, thousands and thousands of years old. But yeah, there's nothing in the bylaws that's, unless you actually have a market where it's conceptually like an organic market, there's nothing. I attend 8 farmers markets year round. There's nothing in any of the language, and they're all different, that prohibits people using.
Last question
Yeah.
related to that. Do you know a percentage of like the growers in those farmers markets you attend who are practicing organic methods versus those?
Well,
practicing
from a
organic?
certified organic standpoint, it's very small.
Yeah, but not just certified.
Yeah, I would say probably half, somewhere 50 to 60% of folks are practicing like very sustainable, either like, you know, anything from or uncertified organic to like even like biodynamic, which gets pretty out there.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Okay.
Yep.
So
That's my anecdotal.
Your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you have invasive vegetation such as tree thistles and autumn olive?
Russian olive?
Yeah. And
Yeah, and Chinese honeysuckle.
Is it something that you
Yeah,
have
so-
some magic bullet that takes care of that?
Goats. I have a whole chapter on goats. Goats are a 4-letter word to me, actually, because they won't stay put on my farm. But yeah, I mean, nature operates in balance. That's saying like nature hates a vacuum, right? We all know this stuff. That stuff appears because it's filling a void, where it's out of balance. Predator-prey relationships, grazer-grazee relationships, all these things. So yeah, if that stuff's invasive, then there is I think Paul Simon has like some line in some song where he says, nature always has the remedy, right? So yeah, on our farm is no different. We're able to.
What about if you get a sick animal?
Right.
A cow that needs an injection of antibiotics or it's going to die?
Sure. That's happened twice in my entire career. I've had 2 cases of pneumonia where I had to give a penicillin to. Yeah, and those animals end up at the stockyard where all other antibiotic destined animals go. Winchester Livestock Exchange. They go out of our farmers market food system.
You got a tag on your second.
Yeah, I mean, I've run 100 cattle. I know them all like, you know, I know their faces and personalities and whatnot. 100 a slaughter each year. We raise about 200 a year. Yeah, but pink eyes are our most common thing, and there's 2 great homeopathic remedies, Caliiod and Euphrasia, which we're able to spray on them from a distance. It's awesome. It has about 90% efficacy. If anybody's raising cattle and wants to know that stuff, send me an email. Send a resource on that.
So we're approaching 5 o'clock. So I want to thank Brown Residential College and the Festival of the Book, Forrest Pritchard for what's been a really engaging conversation. I just want to thank you all for your questions. I thought it was an excellent array of questions. But don't leave. I'm going to open these window shades, let the light in. We have some iced tea and lemonade and snacks in the back, and we have books here, which Forrest has generously offered to sign. So join me in thanking Forrest for visiting us.